A child says things like, I can't, it's too hard, I don't want to. And most of us immediately start asking the wrong questions. Do they need more help? Do they need more toughness? But what if neither explains what's actually happening? Because some kids stop trying long before they stop being capable. And if you miss this distinction, and I know this as a former special education teacher, twin mom, and parent support coach, that you can accidentally teach quitting while you're trying to build your child's resilience. A few days ago, my son completely broke down during what should have been a pretty simple preschool activity. And maybe you'll see your child in this, because honestly, it got me thinking about something that I think a lot of parenting advice gets wrong. The activity was addition using pom-poms and paper ice cream cones. It was a simple math equation on each cone, something like 2 plus 3. And the kids would put 2 pom-poms and then 3 additional pom-poms on one scoop, count them to figure out the answer. So there were 7 problems in total. My son got through the first 2. Then everything fell apart. He started getting really frustrated, shutting down, and he started saying it was too hard and that he was going to quit. And before long, we were in full meltdown territory. Now, here's what didn't make so much sense. He already solved the first 2, which meant he could do the math. So if he could do the math, why did everything suddenly start falling apart? And if you're starting to see your kid in this, pay close attention, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd seen this exact same pattern somewhere else. The second clue. So a few weeks ago, I made a giant hopscotch around our driveway. So I decided to make one with alphabet letters, A, B, C, D. It was simple. At least I thought it was. And here is kind of the nuance of things, because the problem was that I wrote the letters facing the way you would read them, like you would read a piece of paper. Now, it was not the way the boys would be hopping on them around the driveway. So we got to uppercase I. And because of that angle, it looked like an uppercase H. And my son immediately got frustrated. We already did H. He got upset. He wanted to start over every single time we got there, and he couldn't actually get through the alphabet. And I could tell he was shutting down. He knows many of the letters, so he should be able to fill in the blank and figure out, okay, I already did H, that's an I, we just move on, right? That seems simple to us as adults. But it wasn't the alphabet that was the problem. It wasn't the addition that was the problem. What did these 2 situations really have in common? Because I couldn't stop thinking about the question, and that brings us to the parenting debate. So this is where I started thinking about all the parenting advice that we hear. One side can kind of be polarized and say we're helping kids too much. And then the other side says we're expecting too much of our kids, lower the demands. And so as both a mom and a former special education teacher, I've always felt caught somewhere in the middle, because I've seen support completely change a child's experience. But I also have seen how challenges can help kids grow. So neither explanation felt complete to me. And that's when something finally clicked. So I think we have been looking at the wrong thing when we ask questions. When we hear the word quitting, we imagine a child who refuses to try, a child who gives up and they walk away. But I don't think that is exactly where quitting starts. I think quitting starts much earlier. It starts when a child begins believing that effort won't lead to success. Because if success doesn't feel possible, trying stops making sense. And suddenly a child who is capable starts saying, I can't. Not because they lack the skill, but because somewhere along the way, they stop believing that they could be successful. Which brings me to what my twins taught me about this. So once I started looking at things this way, I started noticing a pattern with my twins. As parents, it's really easy to compare, especially when you have 2 children the same exact age, or maybe you have kids close in age. And sometimes one of my boys can keep going. He'll tackle the challenge, he'll work through it, he'll stick with it, and the other one just starts shutting down. And the natural question is why? Why can one do it and the other one is struggling right now? And why is one seemingly trying harder? But I don't think they're answering the same question. One child believes success is within reach. The other child starts feeling like success is slipping out of their reach. And once I saw that, I started imagining a gap. One side is the child, on the other side is success. And every challenge creates this gap between the two. And if the gap feels jumpable, kids tend to try. If the gap feels impossible, kids tend to quit. Not because they're lazy, not because they're spoiled or lacking resilience, but because from where they're standing, success no longer feels reachable. And there's actually a parenting filter that may actually be teaching our kids to quit accidentally, which I will get to to shortly. But first, I want to talk about the 4 ways we can misdiagnose things with our children that keep us and them stuck. So I think as parents, this is where we can accidentally get ourselves in trouble when we're trying to be helpful. Because when we only look at behavior, we start making assumptions. And once we make the wrong assumption, we usually give the wrong response. So here are the 4. We'll push when support is needed instead. We'll rescue when encouragement is needed. We'll misread overwhelm as laziness. And we'll misread avoidance is incapability. And every one of those mistakes moves us further away from understanding what the child is actually experiencing. Because behavior isn't the diagnosis, it's a clue. Tears are a clue, frustration, shutting down, the I can't is a clue. The question is whether we're curious enough to figure out what it is trying to tell us. And that leads to the question I think that matters most, the filter we're using. So when your child says, I can't, before asking, should I push harder or should I help more, ask yourself, has my child stopped believing success is possible? Because if the answer is yes, that changes everything. And honestly, this is one of the biggest lessons I've learned from special education. Good teachers don't start with intervention right away. They start understanding first. They ask what's actually happening here. What is the child experiencing? What makes this feel difficult or impossible? Because the same behavior can come from completely different experiences. One child might need support. Another one might need more encouragement. Another might be confused or tripped up over something somewhere. Another might be overwhelmed. Another might be afraid of getting it wrong. The behavior can look identical. The experience underneath can be completely different, which brings us back to exactly what the title of this video is. And how do we accidentally teach kids to quit? I don't think it's because we help them too much. And I don't actually think it's because we push them too hard. I think we accidentally teach kids to quit when success repeatedly feels impossible and we misunderstand what they're experiencing. Because every time a child faces something difficult, they answer a question. Is success possible for me? And the answer they give themselves matters a lot more than whether the task was easy or hard. And if you like movie metaphors, this reminds me actually of a scene in a Paw Patrol movie. There's a moment where one of the main characters, Chase, has to make a huge jump in a rescue to save Ryder. Earlier, he already failed. He already started doubting himself. And now he's standing there facing a massive gap. What's interesting is that Chase didn't suddenly become more talented. He didn't get a new skill. And the gap that he had to jump for the rescue didn't become smaller. What changed was that he started believing he could make the jump. And the moment he believed he could make the jump was the moment it was possible. And he was willing to try. That's what I think we're seeing with kids too. Not a skill gap, a belief gap. And that's what finally clicked for me and my own boys. It wasn't the addition. It wasn't the alphabet. It wasn't the skill. Somewhere along the way, success stopped feeling possible. And when success stops feeling possible, kids don't usually quit all at once. First, they hesitate. Maybe they avoid a little bit. Then they stop trying. Eventually, they start saying, I can't. And that's why I don't think the goal is to make things easier for our kids. And I don't think the goal is to make things harder either. I think the goal is to help our children experience enough moments of success that they keep answering yes to the question, is success possible for me? Because kids don't learn resilience from being overwhelmed. They learn resilience from discovering that success was possible after all. All right, parents, I will see you in the next video.